They say monsters hide in shadows, but Lyra had learned the most dangerous place to hide was in plain sight, wrapped in human skin, breathing their air, speaking their words, bleeding red just like them, even though her true blood ran silver as moonlight. 10 years. 3,650 days of careful lies. Each morning she stood before her cracked mirror in the servants' quarters of Shadowmere Palace, pressing her palm against the glass while whispering the ancient words that bound her true nature beneath this fragile human disguise. The incantation grew harder each passing season, like holding her breath underwater while her lungs screamed for air that would never come. She had been 17 when she first walked through Shadowmere's gates, just another refugee from the border wars seeking work in the kitchens. No one questioned another desperate girl with calloused hands and a willingness to scrub floors. No one suspected that beneath her sun-weathered skin lived something ancient, something that belonged to the old world before humans learned to forge iron and speak prayers. Now, at 27, or whatever age meant to something like her, Lyra stood in the pre-dawn darkness of the vast kitchen, kneading bread with the methodical rhythm that had become her meditation. The other servants called her lucky, a cruel irony that made her bite her tongue until it bled human red. Lucky, because she'd survived when so many hadn't. Lucky, because she worked in the palace while others begged in the streets. If only they knew she was the very creature their priests warned them about in sermons, the last of the ethereals, beings of pure magical essence who once ruled these lands before the Great Purge. The kitchen door burst open, bringing winter wind and chaos. "The king returns!" Marcus, the head cook, bellowed, 3 days early from the northern campaign. Lyra's hand stilled in the dough. King Theron Blackstone, the alpha who had inherited his throne 5 years ago when his father died mysteriously in his sleep. The same alpha whose wolf could supposedly smell a lie from 3 kingdoms away, whose eyes, dark as winter nights, saw through every pretense and facade. She had managed to avoid him for 5 years, keeping to the kitchens during royal functions, disappearing into the servant passages whenever his presence filled the palace like smoke from a wildfire. But sometimes, in the deep of night, she felt him. A pull like gravity, like drowning, like every mistake she'd ever run from calling her home. The other servants erupted into motion, but Lyra remained frozen, flour dusting her arms like snow. Because she could feel it now, his presence approaching the palace like a storm rolling in from the sea. Her true nature stirred beneath her human mask, recognizing something in him that terrified her more than any witch hunter's blade or priest's holy fire. "Lucky," Marcus snapped. "Stop daydreaming. We need fresh bread for the king's table." She forced herself to move, but her hands trembled. Today felt different. The air itself held its breath. Strange signs had been appearing lately. Children in the market whose eyes held flecks of silver, shadows that moved independently of their casters, iron tools that sometimes grew warm without cause. As she worked, memories surfaced unbidden, her mother's crystalline form shattering under iron hammers, her sister's screams as holy water burned through her essence. The night she learned to fold herself into human shape, compress her infinite nature into finite flesh, swallow her silver light until only darkness remained. The weight of being the last, the only, the survivor who lived by becoming everything her people were not. By the time the sun crested the mountains, painting Shadowmere's black stone walls gold, the kitchen buzzed with preparations. Lyra had just pulled fresh loaves from the ovens when she heard it. Footsteps in the corridor beyond. Not the hurried scramble of servants or the measured pace of guards, but something else. Deliberate. Predatory. The footsteps stopped directly outside the kitchen door. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to shift into wind and shadow and flee this place forever. But she couldn't move. Her human disguise held her like a prison, and beneath it, her true nature writhed in recognition of what stood beyond that door. The handle turned. King Theron Blackstone stepped inside, and the kitchen fell silent as death. He was exactly as the stories claimed, tall enough to dwarf most men, shoulders broad as mountain ranges, with hair dark as raven wings and a face carved from stone and shadow. But it was his eyes that stopped hearts, deep brown with flecks of gold, holding the weight of every secret ever whispered in darkness. Those eyes swept the kitchen, past cowering servants and steaming pots, past everything and everyone until they found her. And stopped. The world narrowed to that singular moment, the Alpha King staring at a flower-covered servant girl, while something primal and undeniable stirred in the space between them. For 10 eternal seconds, neither moved. The kitchen held its breath while Lyra's heart hammered against her ribs. Too fast, too hard, too human. She forced herself to bow with the others, keeping her eyes fixed on the stone floor where flour had mixed with her footprints to create small clouds of dust. "Your Majesty," Marcus stammered, "we weren't expecting—" "Forgive us. The morning preparations." "Continue your work." The king's voice rolled through the room like distant thunder, deep enough to shake foundations. "I came to inspect the kitchens personally." Lies. Even Lyra, trapped in her human shell, could taste the deception. Alpha Kings didn't inspect kitchens at dawn. They had stewards for that. Whole hierarchies of servants to ensure their bread was fresh and their meat properly seasoned. She kept her head down, hands mechanically shaping loaves while every nerve screamed warnings. Through her peripheral vision, she watched his boots, black leather worn from battle, move between the preparation tables. He paused at each station, asking questions about ingredients and preparation methods that no king should know or care about. He was circling her, like a wolf stalking prey through underbrush. "And what do we have here?" His boots stopped directly in front of her table. "Lucky, Your Majesty," Marcus answered quickly. "Been with us nearly 10 years now. Makes the finest honey bread in the kingdom." "Lucky." The king tasted the name like wine, rolling it around his mouth. "Look at me." It wasn't an alpha command. Those held power that could force even the strongest will to bend. This was softer, more dangerous. A request that sounded like destiny calling. Lyra raised her head slowly, carefully keeping her expression blank as their eyes met. The impact was instantaneous. Something electric crackled between them, invisible lightning that made every candle flame in the kitchen flicker. His pupils dilated, brown consuming gold until his eyes looked like portals to the earth's core. She saw the exact moment his wolf rose to the surface, a flash of amber rimming the darkness before vanishing. "Interesting," he murmured, tilting his head as if solving a puzzle. "Tell me, Lucky, where are you from originally?" "The southern villages, Your Majesty." The lie came smooth as silk, practiced thousands of times. "My family died in the plague 10 years ago." The plague. His lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Yes, many were lost during that time. He knew. Somehow, impossibly, he knew she was lying. She could see it in the predatory stillness of his stance, the way his nostrils flared slightly as if scenting something beneath her human disguise. But he didn't call her out, didn't demand truth. Instead, he reached for one of her half-formed loaves, his fingers brushing hers in the process. The contact lasted less than a heartbeat, but it sent silver fire racing through her veins. Her true nature surged against its bonds, desperate to answer whatever had just called to it through his touch. She jerked back, the bread tumbling between them, and for one horrifying moment she felt her disguise flicker. Her shadow on the wall shifted wrong, too many angles, too much depth, like looking at a reflection in broken water. The air around her shimmered with heat that had nothing to do with the ovens. The king's eyes widened fractionally. "Forgive me, your majesty," she gasped, dropping to her knees, genuinely terrified now. "I'm clumsy." "Rise." The command was gentle but absolute. She stood on shaking legs as he studied her with an intensity that could peel paint from walls. "You'll serve at tonight's welcome feast." "But your majesty?" Marcus interjected. "Lucky works in the kitchens, not the dining." "Tonight, she serves." His tone brooked no argument. Then, to her specifically, "Wear something fitting for the great hall." "You'll pour wine at the high table." The high table, where she'd be exposed to every noble, every advisor, every person who might notice something amiss. Where she'd have to stand for hours under the scrutiny of beings who hunted her kind for sport. But worse than that, where she'd be near him. One more thing. The king turned at the doorway, his dark gaze finding hers across the chaos of the kitchen. "Your shadow, Lucky. You might want to tend to it." Her blood turned to ice. She glanced down to find her shadow stretched in impossible directions, writhing like something alive, reaching toward him with gossamer fingers that belonged to no human form. It had been misbehaving more frequently lately, as if her disguise was weakening after a decade of constant use. When she looked up again, he was gone, leaving only the echo of his presence and the terrible certainty that her decade of hiding had just ended. The great hall transformed at sunset, 1,000 candles casting dancing shadows across stone walls that had witnessed centuries of secrets. Lyra stood in borrowed servant's attire, a deep blue dress that actually fit, unlike her usual shapeless kitchen garb, trying to calm the storm beneath her skin. "Remember?" Helena, the head serving woman, whispered harshly. "Pour from the right, never speak unless addressed, and whatever you do, don't look the nobles in the eye." If only it were that simple. The doors opened and the nobility of Shadowmere flooded in like a tide of silk and ambition. Lyra recognized some from her years of hiding: Lord Garrett with his perpetual sneer, Lady Morgana, whose husband had died under mysterious circumstances, and dozens more who played politics like blood sport. Then came the announcement that made her bones ache. His Majesty, King Theron Blackstone, and an honored guest, High Priestess Seraphina of the Order of Iron. Lyra's breath caught. The Order of Iron. Witch hunters who had led the Great Purge, who wore her people's crystallized remains as trophies, and their high priestess herself, young for such a position at perhaps 30 years, with white blonde hair and eyes like chips of ice. Seraphina glided in wearing robes of pure white, iron chains wrapped around her waist and wrists, both decoration and weapon. At her throat hung a pendant that made Lyra's true nature recoil, a shard of crystallized ethereal essence, still faintly pulsing with trapped life. The king entered beside her, dressed in black that absorbed light like a void. His eyes found Lyra immediately, tracking her as she took her position behind the high table. "Your Majesty," Seraphina purred, settling into the seat of honor. "I'm grateful for this welcome. The Order has much to discuss regarding the recent disturbances." "Disturbances?" Theron's voice held polite interest, though his gaze never left Lyra. Magical signatures in the borderlands, signs that perhaps not all the ethereals perished in the purge. She smiled, cold as winter frost. We suspect at least one survivor walks among us, hidden behind human guise. There have been anomalies. Children born with silver-flecked eyes, shadows that move strangely, iron that grows warm without cause. Lyra's hand trembled as she poured wine, a single drop splashing onto the white tablecloth like blood on snow. So others had noticed the signs she'd been seeing. "Careful," the priestess said, those ice-blue eyes suddenly fixed on her. Nervous hands often indicate guilty conscience. "Leave the girl be," Theron commanded softly. "She's unused to serving the high table." "Of course." Seraphina's smile sharpened. "Though I must say, Your Majesty, your servants have an unusual energy about them." The meal progressed with agonizing slowness. Every time Lyra approached to refill glasses, she felt Seraphina watching, evaluating, hunting. The pendant at the priestess's throat grew warmer whenever Lyra drew near, its trapped essence crying out to its own kind. Halfway through the second course, disaster struck. Lord Garrett, deep in his cups, grabbed Lyra's wrist as she poured. "Pretty thing, aren't you? Perhaps the king would share—" The rage came instantly, involuntarily. Her true nature surged against its bonds, and for a split second, her skin flickered. Human flesh becoming translucent, revealing the silver starlight beneath. Garrett jerked back with a cry. "Her hand! Did you see?" "You're drunk," Theron said flatly, his alpha command rippling through the words. "You saw nothing but wine shadows. Apologize to the girl and retire." The Lord's mouth moved soundlessly, fighting the command, before he mumbled an apology and stumbled from the hall. But Seraphina had seen. Her eyes gleamed with predatory triumph. "How fascinating," she murmured, rising gracefully. "Your Majesty, might I perform a small demonstration? The Order has developed new methods for detecting hidden creatures." Before Theron could respond, she pulled out a vial of clear liquid. Holy water mixed with iron shavings, Lyra realized with horror. The priestess began splashing it on nearby servants, who merely looked confused, as the water harmlessly dampened their clothes. "You see? Harmless to humans." Seraphina approached Lyra with deliberate steps, but to an ethereal. Lyra backed away, but there was nowhere to run. The priestess raised the vial, and time seemed to slow. The water arced through the air, catching candlelight like falling stars. A hand shot out, catching the water before it could touch her. Theron stood between them, the holy water sizzling against his palm, burning his skin with the sound of meat on a hot pan. The hall gasped collectively. "Your Majesty," Seraphina stepped forward. "You're injured." "You forget yourself, priestess." His voice could have frozen flame. "No one threatens what is mine." The possessive claim rang through the hall like a bell toll. Mine. An alpha's claim, witnessed by hundreds. Seraphina's eyes narrowed. "She's not human, Your Majesty. Surely you can sense." "I sense," Theron interrupted, "that you've overstayed your welcome. Guards, escort the priestess to prepare for departure. She will remain as our guest until certain matters are resolved." As guards surrounded her, Seraphina's gaze locked on Lyra with naked hatred. "The Order knows what you are, abomination. We've been hunting your kind for 10 years, and we won't stop now." The palace corridor stretched endless and empty, lit only by moonlight streaming through tall windows. Lyra ran, her borrowed dress tangling around her legs, her human disguise fracturing with every step. Behind her she could hear pursuit, not guards, but something else. A presence that made her bones sing and her true nature claw at its prison. She burst through a door and found herself in the palace's ancient library, dust motes dancing in silver moonbeams. Her reflection in the dark windows showed the truth, her disguise failing, human features flickering between flesh and starlight. "Stop running." His voice came from everywhere and nowhere. Theron emerged from shadows like he'd been born from them, his burned hand already healing, something she hadn't known alpha wolves could do. The air between them crackled with unspoken truths and dangerous possibilities. "You knew," she gasped, pressing herself against the bookshelves. "From the moment you walked into the kitchen, you knew." "I suspected." He moved closer with predator grace. "Your shadow, your scent, the way reality seems to bend around you like light through water. But it wasn't until tonight, until I felt the bond, that I knew for certain." "There is no bond." The denial came desperate, automatic. "Ethereals don't have mates. We can't." "Lie to yourself if you must," he said softly, now close enough that she could see gold fracturing through his brown eyes. "But don't lie to me. I've felt you for years, Lucky. Or should I say, Lyra?" Her true name on his lips shattered something inside her. The disguise collapsed entirely. Light exploded from her skin, not harsh, but liquid, like moonlight given form. Her hair floated as if underwater, shifting between silver and starlight. Her eyes became pools of infinite depth, containing galaxies. She stood before him as she truly was, the last ethereal, a being of pure, magical essence wrapped in a form that was almost, but not quite, human. Theron didn't step back. Instead, he reached out, his fingers hovering inches from her cheek. "Beautiful," he breathed, "like touching starlight." "I'm an abomination," she whispered. "Your people hunt mine. The priestess will return with an army. Every moment I remain here puts you in danger." "I've been in danger since the day I took the throne." His hand finally made contact, and where his skin met her ethereal form, silver light danced. "My father didn't die naturally, Lyra. He was poisoned by those who wanted a different king, a weaker one they could control." The confession hung between them. She saw the weight he carried, the loneliness of a throne built on blood and betrayal. "Why did you protect me?" she asked. "Because my wolf recognized you before my mind did." His other hand came up, framing her face. "Because for 5 years, I've felt this pull toward the kitchen, toward a servant who somehow made my wolf howl for its mate. Because you're not the only one hiding your true nature." Before she could ask what he meant, he began to change. Not the fluid shift of a normal werewolf, but something primal and wrong. His bones broke and reformed, his skin rippling with fur that seemed to absorb light. When the transformation ended, a massive wolf stood before her, but its eyes held too much intelligence, its form too large, its presence too otherworldly. "Cursed," he said, his voice strange coming from lupine jaws. "My bloodline carries the curse of the first wolves, the ones who existed before the moon goddess tamed them. We're neither fully human nor fully wolf. We heal from wounds that should kill us, but holy water and iron burn us as they burn you. Monsters, just like the ethereals." Understanding crashed over her. "That's why you can resist alpha commands, why the holy water burned you. You're not purely werewolf. You're something older." He shifted back, the healing ability now making sense. It wasn't wolf magic, but something more ancient. "We're both remnants of the old world, Lyra. Perhaps that's why fate bound us together." "The priestess is being watched. But first, you need to tell me everything. Why you're here, why you've been hiding, what you're really running from. Lyra looked at this impossible alpha, cursed king who'd claimed her before hundreds of witnesses, who stood between her and holy water, who showed her his monstrous truth without fear. My mother, she began, her form flickering between human and ethereal as emotion surged. She didn't die in the purge. She became something else, something hungry. She's been hunting me for 10 years, feeding on ethereal essence to maintain her twisted existence. I came here because the palace's iron wards can work both ways, not just keeping magic out, but hiding it within. But glass shattered. Through the broken window came creatures of living shadow, their forms writhing with corrupted magic. At their center floated a being that might once have been beautiful, an ethereal whose light had turned to darkness, whose essence consumed instead of creating. "Hello, daughter," her mother said, voice like breaking bells. "Time to come home." The shadow creatures lunged simultaneously, their forms spreading across the library like spilled ink. Ancient books crumbled at their touch, centuries of knowledge dissolving into ash. Lyra's light flared instinctively, creating a barrier that made them recoil with shrieks that weren't quite sound. Protective of your pet human? Her mother drifted closer, a perversion of what ethereals should be. Where Lyra glowed silver soft like moonlight, Morrigan blazed with stolen light. Too bright, too harsh, feeding on itself. How disappointing. I raised you to be apex, not prey. You raised me to run, Lyra spat back, her form solidifying with anger. To watch you drain our own kind for power. Theron moved to stand beside her, his cursed wolf rippling just beneath his skin. You must be the disturbances Seraphina mentioned. Morrigan's laugh was like shattering crystal. The little priestess? She's been useful, following my breadcrumbs, flushing out the hidden ones for me to harvest, though she doesn't know it yet. Her attention fixed on Theron with predatory interest. And what are you? Not quite wolf, not quite human. How delicious. Get behind me, Theron commanded, but Lyra grabbed his arm. Number. She's here for me. This is my fight. Our fight, he corrected, and before she could protest, he partially shifted. Not full wolf, but something between, retaining human shape while gaining wolf attributes. His burned hand completed its healing, claws extending, eyes blazing gold. You claimed me as yours when you ran. I claimed you as mine when I stood between you and the holy water. That makes us pack. The word pack resonated with power older than kingdoms. Morrigan's expression twisted. Mate bonds, such primitive magic. She gestured, and her shadow servants attacked again. The battle erupted in chaos. Theron fought like something from nightmares. Too fast, too strong, tearing through shadows with claws that shouldn't exist. But for every shadow destroyed, 2 more formed from the spreading darkness. Lyra's light began to falter. 10 years holding human form had weakened her, made her essence sluggish. She watched in horror as one shadow slipped past her failing barrier, heading straight for Theron's exposed back. No! She moved without thinking, throwing herself between them. The shadow's claws raked across her shoulder, tearing through ethereal form like paper. She screamed, not in human voice, but in harmonics that shattered every remaining window. Silver blood sprayed across ancient stone. Where it landed, flowers bloomed impossibly, moonflowers unfurling in seconds, their glow pushing back the darkness. The signs she'd been seeing, children with silver-flecked eyes, warm iron, suddenly made sense. Her essence had been slowly leaking into the world, seeding it with ethereal magic. Lyra! Theron caught her as she fell, and something primal snapped inside him. The curse he'd controlled his entire life erupted outward. His form expanded, twisted, became something that belonged in humanity's oldest nightmares. Not wolf, not man, but the thing that spawned both. 12 feet of muscle and shadow, eyes like molten gold, maw filled with teeth that could crack mountains. The first wolf, the original monster. Even Morrigan stepped back. With a roar that shook the palace foundations, Theron attacked. Not with strategy or skill, but with primordial rage. He tore through shadows like tissue, his very presence making reality buckle. The cursed bloodline that had been his family's shame became weapon, became wrath, became retribution. But Morrigan had lived 10 years feeding on power. As Theron charged her directly, she smiled and spoke a single word in the old tongue. Stop. The command hit him like a physical wall, not an alpha command, but something older. The same magic that had once bound the first wolves, forcing them to submit to the moon goddess. Theron crashed to his knees, his monstrous form fighting against invisible chains. Fascinating, Morrigan mused, circling him. The curse responds to the original binding. You're not just descendant of the first wolves. You are one, reborn into flesh. She traced a claw along his jaw. I could make such use of you. Mother. Lyra struggled upright, silver blood still streaming. Please, take me. Leave him. Take you? Morrigan laughed. Oh, daughter. I don't need to take you. You're going to give yourself to me. She gestured, and more shadows grabbed Theron, spreading him between them like a sacrifice. His monstrous form began to shrink, the curse being forcibly suppressed, leaving him human and vulnerable. Here's your choice, Morrigan said sweetly. Give me your essence willingly, let me drain you properly, and I'll spare your mate. Refuse, and I'll make you watch while my shadows tear him apart piece by piece. Lyra looked at Theron, suspended between shadows, his eyes blazing defiance even as his body failed. She thought of 10 years running, 10 years hiding, 10 years of careful lies to survive. No more. You want my essence? She stood, her form blazing brighter despite her injury. Then take it. She walked toward her mother, each step leaving moonflowers blooming in her wake. But as she moved, she began to speak in the old tongue, not to Morrigan, but to the palace itself, to the iron in its walls, to the ancient wards. The iron wards responded to Lyra's call, ancient protections built into Shadowmere's foundations suddenly revealing their dual nature. Designed centuries ago not just to repel, but to contain, they awakened at an ethereal's command, forming a cage of pure intention. Morrigan realized the trap too late. What are you doing? She snarled as iron-laced energy crackled through the air, making both ethereals flinch. Something I should have done 10 years ago. Lyra's form grew brighter, not with healthy light, but with the dangerous glow of a star about to supernova. Iron doesn't just hurt us, Mother. In high enough concentration, it can force us back to our pure state. Formless, powerless, essence without consciousness. You'll destroy yourself too. Yes. Lyra's voice held perfect calm. But at least I'll take you with me. The wards strengthened, iron energy pressing inward like a vice. Morrigan's shadow servants dissolved, unable to maintain form under such pressure. The corrupted ethereal herself began to flicker, her stolen power fighting against dissolution. You would die for him? Morrigan gestured at Theron, still suspended but watching with desperate eyes. For a cursed mongrel who'll live maybe 60 years while you could exist for millennia? I've lived in fear for 10 years. I'd rather have one moment of love than another century of running. Lyra began to dissolve at the edges, her form unraveling into pure light. The moonflowers throughout the room bloomed brighter, feeding on her dispersing essence. That's when Theron broke free, not through strength or his cursed form, but through something simpler, the mate bond. Lyra's impending dissolution sent agony through their connection, and his wolf responded with primal fury that shattered Morrigan's weakening control. He crashed to the floor and immediately lunged, not at Morrigan, but at Lyra, wrapping his arms around her dissolving form. "Stop," he commanded. "Not as an alpha, but as her mate. You don't get to leave me." "The wards can be transformed." He pressed his forehead to hers, and she felt it. His wolf, his curse, the monstrous thing inside him reaching out. "You're not the only one who can sacrifice, little star." She felt his intention through their bond, and horror flooded her. "No, you can't." "My curse for your freedom." He smiled, and it was beautiful and terrible. "The first wolf's essence is older than your mother's corruption, older than iron wards. If I release it fully, it will change everything, not destroying but transforming. I won't let you." "Then we do it together." His gold-flecked eyes blazed with certainty. "Your light, my darkness, creation and destruction. Balance." Morrigan screamed, realizing what they meant to do. She threw herself at them, no longer beautiful but monstrous, all pretense of ethereal grace gone. Lyra looked into Theron's eyes and saw forever. "Together," she agreed. They released everything simultaneously. Lyra's ethereal essence exploded outward in waves of pure creation, light that gave rather than took, healing rather than destroying. The moonflower seeds that had been spreading throughout the kingdom for months suddenly bloomed everywhere, in every crack and corner where her essence had touched. Theron's curse erupted in response, darkness that devoured, the primordial hunger of the first wolf unleashed without restraint. Where light met darkness, impossible things happened. The iron wards didn't break. They transformed, becoming silver, then gold, then something that had no name, because it had never existed before. Throughout the palace, children who'd been born with silver-flecked eyes suddenly understood what they were, not cursed, but evolved. Morrigan's corrupted form, caught between creation and destruction, began to unravel. Her stolen power returning not to its victims but to the world itself, seeding it with new possibilities. "This is impossible!" she shrieked as her form dissolved. "Ethereals and wolves are opposite forces. You can't—" "We're not opposites," Lyra said, her voice harmonizing with Theron's growl. "We're balance." The explosion of power should have destroyed them all, should have leveled the palace, shattered the mountain, rewritten the laws of nature. Instead, it reformed everything. Morrigan's essence, purified of corruption, dispersed into the cosmic flow. The twisted hunger that had driven her finally ended. The iron wards throughout the palace transformed into something new, neither keeping magic out nor trapping it in, but channeling it, balancing it, making it part of the world's fabric. And at the center of the transformation, Lyra and Theron collapsed into each other, forever changed. Lyra was still ethereal, but no longer purely so. Threads of shadow wove through her silver light, Theron's essence permanently entwined with hers. She could hold human form without effort now, the wolf curse stabilizing what had always been fluid. Theron remained cursed, but differently. The first wolf no longer fought against his human side, but merged with it. His eyes held permanent flecks of gold among the brown, and shadows bent strangely around him. They were neither fully their original selves, nor completely transformed. They were something new, something balanced. Dawnlight crept through the shattered windows. Where their combined power had erupted, impossible gardens bloomed. Moonflowers and shadow roses, plants that shouldn't exist growing side by side. Footsteps pounded in the corridor. Guards burst in, weapons drawn, only to freeze at the sight before them. Their king holding a being of living starlight while surrounded by impossible flora. Behind them came Seraphina, iron chains rattling, ready for war. She stopped dead at the library's threshold, her pendant, the crystallized ethereal essence, suddenly blazing with warm light rather than cold death. The throne room of Shadowmere Palace had never seen anything like this, a trial where the accused stood proud while the accuser trembled. 3 days had passed since the library's transformation, and word had spread through 7 kingdoms. The last ethereal lived. The Alpha King had claimed her. And somehow, their union had changed the very nature of magic itself. Seraphina stood before the assembled court, her white robes now seeming dim compared to Lyra's natural luminescence. Throughout the crowd, children who'd been born in the past decade watched with silver-flecked eyes, finally understanding the strange dreams they'd been having, the moments when shadows seemed friendly, when iron felt warm. "She is an abomination," Seraphina declared, though her voice lacked conviction. "We're dangerous," Theron corrected from his throne, Lyra standing beside him, their hands entwined. When corrupted by isolation, just as wolves were dangerous before the moon goddess tamed them. "You speak heresy. I speak evolution." Theron rose, shadows crowning him like living mantle while Lyra's light made them deeper, richer. "Show them love." Lyra stepped forward, her form shifting fluidly between human and ethereal. She approached Seraphina and touched the pendant at the priestess's throat. The crystal blazed to life, not with trapped agony, but with joy. The essence inside, freed by Lyra's touch, spiraled upward in ribbons of light that painted stories across the throne room's ceiling. Memories of ethereals who had lived, loved, and died. And more. Visions of them joining with the world itself, their essence spreading like seeds. "They never truly died," Lyra said softly. "When my kind were killed, our essence didn't vanish. It dispersed, seeded itself into the next generation. Every child born since carries a fragment of what we were." The pendant crumbled to dust, but instead of looking diminished, Seraphina stood stunned. Where the crystal had rested against her skin, silver marks appeared, not burns, but blessing marks. "The prophecies," she whispered, "the convergence, when all magical races would become one. We thought it meant domination, but—" "Unity," Lyra finished. "Your iron chains, our ethereal essence, wolf curses, human adaptability, all parts of a greater whole." A commotion at the door interrupted them. Guards dragged in Lord Garrett, but changed. His skin bore unstable ethereal shimmer, his form flickering wrongly. "He tried to steal essence from one of the gifted children," a guard reported. Garrett snarled, lunging at Lyra desperately. Theron moved to intercept, but Lyra raised her hand, stopping him. Instead of defending, she opened her arms. Garrett crashed into her and passed through, his corrupted form unable to hold against pure acceptance. He collapsed, human again, shaking. "Power taken by force corrupts," Lyra said, helping him stand. "Power given freely transforms." She placed her hand on Garrett's forehead, and a small portion of her light passed to him. Not enough to change his nature, but enough to show him what he could become with patience and acceptance. Theron raised his hand for silence. "From this day forward, Shadowmere Palace opens its doors to all, human, wolf, and whatever new forms emerge. We'll teach balance, not Segregation. And the Order of Iron? Serafina asked. Becomes the Order of Balance, Lyra suggested. Protectors, not hunters. Serafina looked at the silver marks on her chest, then at the children throughout the room, beginning to understand their dual nature. I accept. 3 months later, the transformation was complete. Shadowmere had become a beacon. The gardens where moonflowers grew alongside shadow roses became a pilgrimage site. Children who showed signs of ethereal gifts came to learn control. Wolves who struggled with their curses found peace in Theron's teachings. Lyra stood on the palace's highest tower, watching the sunset. She no longer needed to hide. Her form shifted freely between human and ethereal as her mood dictated. Arms wrapped around her from behind, solid, warm, familiar. Regrets? Theron asked. How could I regret this? She turned in his arms. I spent 10 years pretending to be human, only to discover humanity was pretending too, everyone hiding their true nature. And now? Now we're all becoming what we were meant to be. Beautifully mixed. Impossibly balanced. He kissed her then, and where their lips met, light and shadow danced. Across the kingdom, every magical being felt it, the mate bond that had become something more. In the gardens below, a child laughed, born human but touched with ethereal light, carrying wolf strength but shaped by iron's discipline. The first of a new generation that would know no division between races. Your Majesties, Helena appeared. The delegation from the northern kingdoms has arrived. As they descended together, neither hiding their nature, Lyra reflected on her journey. 10 years she'd pretended to be human, only to discover that everyone had been pretending, hiding their full selves out of fear. But when the Alpha King had marked her as his, he'd broken the chains that kept all of them hiding. The age of hiding was over. The age of balance had begun. And in Shadowmere Palace, 2 souls who had found each other against impossible odds ruled not with power, but with acceptance. Sometimes we spend so long pretending that we forget our true nature isn't meant to be hidden. It's meant to be shared and celebrated with those who see us for who we really are.